Welcome back, strategic angling fans. This is episode number 14. It's going to be a good one. We want to talk with you guys about spinner baits. It is now mid-April, and these baits are definitely going to get some play as fish get a little more active. I mean, they're a good bait even when fish aren't super active. But anyway, I'm going to kick it over to my guest star of the show today, JJ Patton. He's going to tell us a little bit about what is a spinner bait, the different kinds, and then we might talk about some specific ones we use and why. So.
Star might be a stretch, but spinnerbait's been around a long time. When I was growing up, it was kind of one of the main baits. You know, a spinnerbait and a rubber worm were basically what everybody used all the time in the 80s, 70s and 80s and stuff. So basically an overview, a spinnerbait is basically going to be a bait with a wire that comes out of the head. You tie on up here, and then it has some blades on the other side. There's basically four kinds of blades. Basically, you have your standard Colorado, which is kind of an egg shaped. You have your willow leaf, which is shaped like a willow leaf, and then you have kind of your Indiana and your Oklahoma. Your Indiana is kind of in between a Colorado and a willow leaf. The Oklahoma is kind of a modified Colorado, or it's also called a turtleback by some people. So you're going to want to, depending on where you're fishing, the water clarity, the depth, the speed you want to retrieve it is going to depend on what type of blade you use. I'm just going to kind of go over it in general. Probably the one I use the most is a single Colorado. Some people call it a thumper. It's just one single blade. It's usually fairly large. This is good in cold water and in muddy water, and there's a lot of lift to this blade, so you can reel it extremely slow and the blade still thumps and spins. It's real good on the river, which is why I use it the most probably. You can also do a tandem Colorado, which is where you have a little Colorado on the arm and then a couple spacers and then a bigger Colorado down here. This probably doesn't have as much thump. The little blade kind of interferes with the thumping action. It does have more lift, however, if you're fishing in extremely shallow water, like over a mud flat in the river or around timber or something. You want it to lift up. This will give it a little more lift. The willow leaf in general, I mean, people fish a single willow, but in general, usually you're going to go a double willow leaf, either with a Colorado up here or a second willow. This is real good if you're burning. You can put a heavier one of these on, and up north and in the Great Lakes and smallmouth land, you can throw a bright, gaudy spinnerbait and throw it as far as you can and burn it back. Smallies like it. The Colorado blades come through weeds a little bit better than the willow leaf blades come through weeds a little better than the Colorado. There's more flash. They're longer. But they don't have as much pulse or lift, so in the muddy water they don't give us off as much vibration. You can go different colors, silver, gold, white and chartreuse is a good one for smallmouth. Sometimes you go a red one. A lot of guys in dirtier water will throw a red or an orange kicker blade up on the top. But most of the time you're going to be throwing these on a kind of a medium action rod. A Dobbins 734 is a good one. You're going to be using fairly heavy line. The line does not affect the action of the bait, so you can throw it on heavy fluorocarbon or mono or braid. It's a good bait. It gets bit, and it's been around a long time. Caught a lot of fish. It's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit with the chatterbait and the swim jig craze. But it's still got a place, and especially if there's a lot of chop on the water, or if it's overcast or rainy, or like I said, in cold, muddy water, you get that big thumper blade, and they can really feel it coming towards them.
Yeah, so the different blades that he just explained, and he probably covered it, I don't know if I heard it or not, but they all just displace water differently, and then the size of the blade really determines how much water they're going to displace. So like everything, they have a number to them, and they start number 1 is very small, and the higher number, the more kick you'll get. So when you hear somebody say like, "Oh, I was using a size 6 Colorado," that's a pretty hefty size Colorado blade that's thumping a lot of water, and some guys even go bigger. But That's what the numbering is. If you ever hear anybody talk about, what size they were using or style. I had never heard of the Oklahoma one. Do you have one, or what did they look like?
That's this one.
That's that one.
It's also called turtleback.
I
think
like a rounded Indiana almost.
It's a little more elongated than a Colorado, and it also has kind of a crease down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly know exactly the advantage of it over Colorado.
Just another thing to buy, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
It fits kind of in the middle, so if you're not really sure, I guess you throw an Indiana or a Oklahoma turtleback. Then you're kind of in the middle. The one thing too, like Brady was saying on blade sizes, a lot of people will tell you that you want to match the blade sizes to the size of whatever they're eating. So if they're eating big gizzard shad, you want a big number 6 or 7. If they're eating small little pin minnows or river minnows or things like that, then you might want smaller willows that don't give off as much flash or vibration to more accurately mimic the forage.
The other thing that I find advantageous about a spinnerbait is that you can really fish it a lot of different ways. They come through wood great. You can even flip them. I've got some really big ones here that I'm sure the river won't see much of, but they might if it's a channel, a wing dam deal. But this is an 1.5 ounce blade with a gigantic single willow on there, but I use this at a place that rhymes with Fostgrove on some deep brush piles, because I know not many people are out there sinking 1.5 ounce giant spinnerbaits and bringing them over brush. So super versatile. Like my river setup couldn't be more different than what I would use, in a dirty, deeper lake environment. So you can go really wild with your spinnerbait options, and I kind of have, of course, but that's just one thing I wanted to mention is you can get some really big, heavy spinnerbaits, and they're good offshore bait as well.
And a lot of guys, like I was saying earlier, on the Great Lakes, guys will throw a 3/4 or 1 ounce spinnerbait like that big one, and just bomb it across these reefs and burn it, and those big giant smallmouth will come up and just inhale it. I mean, it's a fun way to fish. I mean, they'll likely break your arm when they hit it because they hit it so hard.
And another thing to talk about with spinnerbaits, there's a bunch of popular different ones out there. I'm sure JJ will tell us a couple he likes to use, but some that I used last year that are a little pricier are called a Jason Christie Booyah Covert. Mm-hmm. And those come with a very unique head that make them apparently run true. A nice skirt, a decent hook, and then they use Hildebrandt blades. And I know K&K has some of these, and these are a good option, but they are a little pricey. So one thing I did this off season to save money was spend roughly $500 on different spinnerbait heads so I could make my own and save $1 or $2 in the long run. So that's what I have here is I've got a box of spinnerbait components, and this will probably be a later video on how to make a spinnerbait, but for me, I like having, option if I feel like there's a bite going on and I don't have one already pre-made for. The nice thing with spinnerbait is it's not terribly challenging to actually make your own. So
no,
I've got a box in the boat to whip one up in under a minute probably, to just like very similar to a covert and a little cheaper. So, and the nice thing is K&K, I don't know if it's it's like in the back left corner, they have a little lure modification area, and you can find pretty much all this stuff in my little box here which is another advantage of shopping.
Yeah, I know you got the wire pliers. I have these also, and these are great. Like if I have this spinnerbait and I want to change these blades, I can just straighten out this thing and stick new blades on there and make it however I want it, which is part of the fun of it. You can kind of modify it into your own. This one here I changed to a chartreuse and white blade. This is a real small little guy, but yeah, the possibilities are endless. I like War Eagles. I think they're a real good spinnerbait. They're well designed. They have a pretty thin wire on them, and that gives the thinner wire allows the blade to vibrate a little bit more. Dobbins makes a good spinnerbait. There's actually two models. There's Advantage and the Beast. Just good, War Eagle and Dobbins, both the good quality components, a ball bearing swivel. That makes sure that blade spins. Good blades that are made out of material that doesn't rust real easily. A good quality hook. You can also, a lot of guys put a trailer hook on. I don't always have one on the river, just because there's so much, usually fishing around wood and stuff. But a lot of times it's helpful to have a trailer hook on. Also, you can put a trailer bait, a little swim bait that can provide more lift. You can fish it slower. I know that Jason Christie, throws that big cobra. I think he puts a big paddle tail swim bait on there too, and just crawls that thing on the bottom. But the possibilities are kind of endless, and that's what kind of makes it fun. Color wise, usually you're kind of imitating bait fish in general. So a white or a white and chartreuse is usually pretty good. And this time of year, you can throw some red. If you're in a pond or a lake that may not have shad and you want to imitate bluegill, then a blue and chartreuse, or a green and orange and chartreuse. That's a bluegill colored spinnerbait or a crappie colored spinnerbait would be a good choice.
Yeah, and we've already aired a storage video, but again, getting yourself a place to store your spinnerbaits safely so you don't ruin them is always a good investment.
Yeah.
I actually popped down to K&K a couple days ago, and they had a good, nice Plano shipment in, and I'm actually replacing this Flambeau box, which I didn't really care for, and Plano makes a similar one that I'm going to be grabbing. I already got a couple of, so just taking care of your stuff, because again, if you store one of these spinnerbaits with the wire, pinched in a weird way or off kilter, it's going to cause not to run how you want it to. So
that brings up a good point too. Like if you're reeling your spinnerbait in and it looks like it's twirling, sometimes if it cartwheels, that means the blade might be too big for the weight of the head. You can either add weight to the hook with a crimp on or some suspend dots, or put a smaller blade on. The other thing that'll happen is that a fish will eat it and it'll get bent over. Then you just have to kind of make sure it's in line. So you want to kind of have hook in line with the upper wire and the lower wire all in parallel. And you can kind of look and eyeball it. If it's off a little bit, it won't run real well, and it won't be as weedless. So
you saying those things made me think of another thing, is the tie. So a lot of spinnerbaits, there's two methods to where you tie the line. One is a bend style, which is, I don't know, probably the more popular option is just a bend. And this is actually a covert. But the ones I like to flip, I don't want to put that bend on, because I'm like flipping with braid and heavier rods. I get the ones that have the closed off, twisted circular tie. So that way, if you do luck yourself into a nice bass, or for JJ and I, it's probably a nice log. When you jam a hook set, you're not mangling that as hard, or at least you don't risk losing a fish because it bent out. I know sometimes I've been hearing stories of guys in Florida that have actually bent these out completely and lost fish because this arm went like crazy from the fish taking the line tie. So that's another thing I like to do, is to look at the way these are tied, and then look at what kind of application I'm going to use it on. If I'm going to run this with fluoro on offshore and I'm going to reel it slow, no problem here with this. But if you're going to run braided line, heavy rods, close combat fishing, I would maybe look into finding one that's got the closed off line tie. So
yeah, so some guys will even put like the other thing, the disadvantage of the R bend is that your line will go down here or go down here. So some guys will take a jig collar or a little braces rubber band and put it around there to hold, so your line stays up there, and that kind of holds the wire too. You could also just tie, braid or some fly tying wire around it just to close it off if you didn't want to buy a whole new bait. Yeah,
that's about all I got on spinnerbaits. So you got anything else you want to cover, add, talk about?
Yeah, northern pike like them. If you're fishing around pike, you might want to have a spare, but otherwise they're a good bait, and they catch fish.
They're a great bait on the river around here with the dirty water.
Yep,
a great bait. So, all right, well, that wraps up another episode for us. Hopefully we have an interview to bookend. If we don't, see you next Friday, where we're going to be talking about something else. So we'll see you then.
All right, thanks guys.